Son? Thank you. Okay, yesterday we started Bishul. So we learned that the definition of cooking on Shabbos means changing the texture of anything through heat. It doesn't have to necessarily be food. It could be even if somebody melts metal, let's say. That would be called cooking on Shabbos because you're changing the texture of the metal through heat. So any object whatsoever that you're changing the texture of it through heat is called cooking. We also learned that cooking for solid food, what is considered cooking for solid food? So we discussed this, was called Meichel ben der Rasoi, which is the gangster used to eat his food partially cooked. So it's either half cooked or entirely cooked. Third cooked or half cooked. So you have to go stricter. That means if somebody cooks food on Shabbos, even if they only cook it halfway or a third of a way, it will still be called cooking on Shabbos. Nevertheless, if food was already half cooked and you continue cooking it on Shabbos, that would also be called cooking on Shabbos, which would be biblically forbidden. So any type of that, now anything that hastens cooking would also be considered cooking. So now we're going to talk in cases when food is not completely cooked yet. Okay? It's not 100% cooked. So let's say you have a pot of soup, okay, that is on the fire, and before Shabbat started, it wasn't cooked yet completely, and the lid was taken off. Now Friday night, the woman lights Shabbos candles. There's no man home to do the malacha. She lights Shabbos candles, then she realizes, oh my gosh, I didn't cover the soup. Now when you cover the soup, that is hastening the cooking process. And according to many opinions, covering a pot is like stirring the pot. In other words, let's go to stirring the pot. Everybody knows that food can be pretty much cooked, but you still mix it. Why? Because stuff at the top is not completely cooked like stuff at the bottom. That's why you always stir the pot, right? So if food is not 100% cooked, not 100% cooked, and it's questionable what that means, because sometimes it could still, not everything was completely cooked. But you stir a pot. I'll give you an example. Let's say Friday night, you put up a cholent. Okay? So Friday night, you decide you're going to stir the cholent. So number one, you take off the lid, right? You take off the cover. And then while it's on the fire, you stir the cholent. So that's a problem. Two things. Number one, stirring it is hastening the cooking because the parts that were on top, at the bottom cooked better, and now you're moving the top to the bottom. So now the top is going to become cooked more than it was as the top. So that's also part of the cooking process. And then if you cover the pot, again, what the covering the pot, the Poskim discuss the question what exactly covering the pot does, but most of them say like this. When you cover a pot, so what happens is the steam goes up and hits the top and then comes back down, and that's like stirring the pot. That's what most poskim say the concept of stirring is. So therefore, if food is not 100% cooked, you can't stir the pot on Shabbos, and you can't while it's on the fire. Even if it's off the fire, we'll discuss. We're talking if it's not 100% cooked and it's on the fire, you cannot cover a pot, you cannot stir the pot. Okay, we'll learn later things of various different ways of doing it. Not only that, changing the position of the pot. Let's say you move a pot closer to the fire. So again, you're hastening the cooking, because now it's going to cook quicker, right? But if you're moving further away from the fire, it's not a problem. You're not cooking anything. But they write, taking out food from a pot that wasn't completely cooked. Let's say a cholent was not completely cooked. And Friday night, you come and take out some food. That's also hastening the cooking process. Why? Because now that there's less food, the pot's going to cook quicker because there's less food to cook. So again, if it's completely cooked, there's not an issue with it. Generally speaking, there's not an issue with it. But if the food is not completely cooked and you're going to take out food, the cholent from Friday night, so then you're lessening the pot and then it's going to cook quicker. So again, you're hastening the cooking process. All these things are part of the melacha bishul. What?
What's the story with if you're holding the lid versus...
We're not talking about that now. What?
When you remove the cover, there are usually like the stains on the cover, but when you remove it, it goes back to water. When you put it back, the water is going to go back into the pot. So is that cooking?
You're jumping the gun, but I'll answer because you asked it. Okay, so let's say you have a pot, okay, you take off the cover, so now there's condensation in the cover. That water cools down very quickly. It cools down very quickly. Now you're going to recover the pot. That water that cooled down already is going to become recooked. We didn't get into those dinim, the difference between by solid food there's no cooking after cooking, but by liquid, once it cools off, there is cooking after cooking. So you have to be careful. You have the same issue, by the way, when you have, I know we're jumping in the gun. Let's say you serve soup. It's not on the fire, or cholent, yeah? You take a ladle, okay, and you serve soup. So now you take the ladle out, and you pour it into a bowl of soup, and then you bring the soup to the table. Now, because it's very little liquid in the ladle, that water cools off very quickly. Now the water's cool. You're going to put it back into the boiling hot pot of soup. Many times, halacha, we're going to get those details later, but many times you'd be recooking that liquid because the liquid cooled down already. So there's a lot of things with the ladle. The ladle's a whole thing by itself.
You have to dry it in between.
You'd have to dry it in between.
Make it
The food being already cooked before Shabbat. No? Is there something about that?
We didn't learn, we just started bishul. Bishul will take a while. And we're going to be repeating things because in order to understand bishul, you have to learn it over and connect all the dots. The Chachamim said, if food's not half cooked before Shabbos, you cannot leave it on a fire on Shabbos. Because you're going to, if it's not half cooked yet, you're going to hasten the cooking process because you're going to want to eat it Friday night, and you're going to hasten the cooking process, and therefore you're going to make the fire bigger. Okay? If it's half cooked, according to the Alter Rebbe, in all cases it wouldn't be an issue. Okay? You still can't make the fire bigger, you still can't stir it, but just leaving it on the fire is an issue. Unless if you have what's called a blech. So in other words, if somebody wants to put a cholent in a crock pot, just in a again, it's going to sound it, but we're going to, as time goes on, everything will be understood, I hope. If you put cholent up in a crock pot, okay, the cholent has to be half cooked before Shabbos begins.
50%.
Half cooked means 50%. At least half cooked before Shabbos begins. What? No, here you have to be machmer half cooked. Okay. We said yesterday, we learned you have to go machmer both ways. Here it has to be at least half cooked. Otherwise, we're afraid you're going to make the fire bigger or smaller. Now, the way to overcome that is if you have a blech. Now, blech, basically, by the way, the word blech is a Yiddish word which means a sheet of metal. That's what it means. A blech is Yiddish for a piece of metal. So a blech is what you cover the fire with, is called a blech. But you don't, I'll give you an example, a crock pot. Okay, so you have a crock pot, you have the insert of the, oh, this is a perfect crock pot. Okay, this is the insert. Make sure these guys see it. You have the insert, and then you have the mechanism of the crock pot. Okay, the mechanism of the crock pot is considered the stovetop. It's the fire. Okay, this is the pot that's on the fire. the insert. If you don't have food that's half cooked before Shabbos in a crock pot, you have to put a blech throughout over the whole fire, which means in this case you'd have to put aluminum foil inside the mechanism around the whole circumference of the crock pot, and it should be protruding a little bit out that you can see there is a blech there. That will remind you not to make the fire bigger. That's one purpose of a blech. There's another purpose of a blech if you want to return food to the fire on Shabbos. That's what you talk about, holding it, whatever it is. So, but we're going off topic. Or I'll give you another example. You have food in the oven, okay, and for whatever reason is, the fire is on, which is a separate issue we're going to get into, it's the whole thing. But let's say you have the oven's on, okay, and before Shabbos you forgot to close the oven door. Now comes Shabbos, you can't close the oven door, because now you're keeping the heat, you're making the stuff cook faster now, because now the heat is becoming inside the oven only, and it's not exposed to the outside, which cools it down. So therefore, that would also be hastening the cooking process, which also wouldn't be allowed. Even though keeping food in the oven on Shabbos is a whole separate issue by itself. Okay.
You have to open it up and in case they touch it, you don't close it.
So what you do is you lock up the kids, make sure they don't touch the oven.
No, but I mean, like an open oven, even without the kids.
Yeah, but an open oven, so you have to make sure before Shabbos. You get, I mean, put it this way, an open oven is not dangerous. If somebody touches it, it's dangerous, but it's not dangerous to the house. So you can get a guy to close the door. Shina is not going to help too much. Shina is only if there's money.
Food out, you can close it, right?
Not if the fire's on.
I'm sorry?
Not if the fire's on.
There's no food in the heat.
That's another malacha. It's not cooking. It's making a fire. There's two separate malachas. There's making a fire, which is one malacha, and then you have make a cooking on Shabbos. One thing has nothing to do with the next.
So what are you cooking in an empty oven?
What?
The fire is on. What are you cooking in an empty
You're not cooking, but are you making the fire bigger by closing the door?
oven? So you're adding to the fire.
Or let's take it another way. If I open the oven door, yeah, cold air goes in. So what's going to happen to the oven temperature? So it's going to make the fire go work quicker now, right? That's causing fire to get bigger.
Giving Shabbat.
What are the
So
Shabbos modes?
I'm not talking about Shabbos modes, which are a big issue by itself. But I'll give you an example, okay? Yeah, we still have time.
So wait, so
I'm answering it. Let's say outside it's 100 degrees, and your air conditioning, it said at 65. Okay? It's a 45-degree difference. So now the shaila is, am I allowed to open the door to my house? I'm going to open the door to walk in. 100-degree air is going to come into the house. That's going to make the air conditioner work quicker, because now it's warmed up. So now, or the opposite way, it's not here in LA, but it's below zero outside, and you have the heat on in the house at 70 degrees, right? And then you're going to walk into the house, so cold air is coming into the house. Why is that allowed? But because you're causing the heater to work quicker, so same thing. What is that different than an oven? Right? If you open an oven door and hot air is going to go in, then when you close the oven door, you're causing the fire to work better. What's the difference? This is allowed and this is not allowed. Not only that, there's another major difference. The temperature outside is zero. The oven is, not the oven, the heat in the house is set as 70. Okay? What's the degree difference? 70 degrees, right? It's 100 degrees outside, the air conditioning is set as 68, so it's a 32 degree difference. Yeah? An oven that's at a 350 and the room is at 68 degrees, between 68 degrees and 350 is a very big difference of temperature. So that's for sure going to make it work quicker. Here it's gradual, it's how much air is coming in, it's spreading out all over the place. You know, it's indirectly causing something to happen, but it's not a direct indirect, it's really happening. But by an oven, you talk about 300 degree difference, so it's a very big difference in that small piece. One.
When you open the oven, it doesn't always, sometimes it's on where you hear it like kind of either.
So it's going to stay on longer.
So then you can say that with the refrigerator.
And Nochanami. So the question is, are you allowed to open a refrigerator on Shabbos? Because the refrigerator is set at 36 degrees, I think, yeah?
You could change it, 30.
Okay, 36 to 40 degrees. Yeah? Now you open the refrigerator door, so the room is set, let's say, at 70. So hot air is going to go into the refrigerator, it's going to make the refrigerator motor go on quicker. Right? That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, if you open it while the motor's on, then it's going to keep the motor longer. Okay? So believe it or not, there are opinions in halacha that you're not allowed to open the refrigerator door when it's off. There are refrigerators, there are opinions that say you can't open the refrigerator when the motor's on. And therefore some people say you're not allowed to open the refrigerator on Shabbos. But the majority of the world is lenient, and they open the refrigerator door when it's working and when it's not working.
And what's the reason for that?
Because it's very indirect. The temperature change is not big at
So
all.
why not for the oven? The same thing. You can
Oven is a 300 degree difference.
That's assuming it's on 350. If you're putting it on 180, it's not.
What's 180?
Let's say the oven's set on 180.
It's still a big difference. It's still over 120
I
degrees.
can't open the freezer because the freezer is what, 30, 28?
Zero.
That's
It's not, it's a 50 degree,
And
there's
I'm
60.
opening it and my house is
The-
70 degrees, that's a 70 degree difference.
Yeah, but this is, you know what it is from 180 to 70? It's a much bigger degree.
20 degree, 30 degree.
No, it's not. It's 50, 60 degrees more. It's a big difference. What?
What if you keep it like, what about like 100 degrees and it's like 68 in your,
Okay, to be continued.